When many people picture the Middle Ages, they imagine bright banners, shining armor, and lively feasts in echoing halls. But if you could step into an ordinary medieval village, your day would not begin with a trumpet call. It would begin with chores in the early gray light, feeding animals, hauling water, gathering fuel, and checking whatever food remained from the last harvest. You would hear more about the weather than about wars, because weather decided whether children ate well or went to bed hungry. You would smell smoke, damp earth, and livestock. The medieval world for most people was not a stage for knights. It was a working life shaped by land seasons and the needs of a local lord. It was ordinary, repetitive, and essential. Welcome to Medieval Spirits. If you enjoy calm, story-driven history that explains everyday life, please like the video, subscribe, and ring the notification bell. Today we are setting aside the spotlight on kings and battles to focus on the families who kept the medieval economy moving. We will step into their homes, follow their work through the year, and look at the local systems of law and custom that shaped their lives. We will talk about labor, diet, housing, health, and family life, not to judge the past, but to understand what it demanded of ordinary people. We will keep the language clear and respectful, and we will focus on what sources and evidence suggest about daily routines, rather than turning hardship into spectacle. You would most likely be a serf, and your life would be defined less by adventure and more by obligation. Serf life often meant long hours, strict expectations, and constant planning around weather harvests and local authority. Yet it also included community support, shared labor, and small moments of joy that mattered: a feast day, a wedding, a good harvest, a song remembered by the fire. This episode is not here to sensationalize the past or claim every day was misery. It is here to show the real framework of rural life, because that framework explains why medieval society looked the way it did and why inequality felt normal for so long. At the heart of serfdom was a simple reality: many rural households were tied to the manor where they lived and worked. In many places, serfs were not treated as property that could be sold one by one like livestock, yet their choices were still limited in practice. Their status was often inherited, which meant children grew up expecting the same duties their parents carried. A household might hold scattered strips in open fields, plus access to common pasture. But the land was not fully theirs in the modern sense. The lord expected service or payments in return, and leaving without permission could bring fines, forced return, or the loss of the small plot a family depended on.
Move along, you stubborn beasts!
Serfs generally had fewer legal protections than free peasants and little voice in politics. In England, many were known as villains, and their lives were shaped by manorial custom and local courts overseen by the lord or his officials, such as a bailiff or a reeve chosen from the villagers. Some medieval writers described peasants as bound to the soil. That phrase is not identical everywhere, but it captures a practical problem.
You will deliver the grain by sundown,
expected labor
or there
and
will be
dues,
consequences.
and it had tools to enforce them.
Understands the urgency.
A serf could not simply decide to take a new job in a
beg your
distant
lordship,
town,
the
and
crops were
even
blighted.
marriage or travel
Surely
might
some
require
clemency.
approval.
The rules
Even
state
if a household
clearly your
improved its
obligation.
tools or saved a little money, their legal status did not automatically change. The exact rules varied widely by region and century.
That'll teach you
Some
to steal our
manors had
grain,
customs
you
that
cur.
allowed
Leave him
negotiation
to
and
rot.
gradual improvement, while others enforced tighter controls. In parts of Western Europe, commutation became more common over time, turning some labor duties into fixed payments, which could give families more control of their schedule if they could afford the rent. In other places, obligations could be increased when lords needed cash or extra hands. In parts of Eastern Europe, systems that resembled serfdom lasted far longer than in the West. But the overall pattern was recognizable. Landowners claimed rights to labor and payments, and peasant households tried to balance those demands with survival. One of the best-known snapshots of rural England comes from the Domesday Book, completed in 1086. It was created to record resources and obligations, and it offers clues about who lived where and what kinds of work were expected. Many serfs owed labor on the lord's demesne fields, the portion of land whose produce went directly to the lord. They plowed, sowed, weeded, harvested, and transported crops often on a weekly schedule that left only certain days for their own strips. They also maintained ditches, repaired fences, cut timber, dug drainage channels, carried loads, and provided seasonal help around the manor. When the lord's harvest was at risk, the manor expected the village to respond. That pressure shaped the rhythm of the year. Spring demanded preparation and planting, sometimes with heavy plows pulled by teams of oxen that moved slowly through stubborn soil. Summer required steady care of crops and animals, along with repairs to tools that wore down quickly. Autumn harvests called for speed before rain and frost, and it often included extra boon days when the Lord demanded additional hands for a short, intense push. Winter brought fuel, gathering, mending clothes, sharpening tools, and careful rationing.
Move!
If a household failed to appear for labor days or missed a payment, it could face fines or extra duties that made the next season harder. Archaeology sometimes shows the long-term effects of repetitive work-worn joints, stress on backs and shoulders, and signs of arthritis that began early. Food was another constant concern because many families lived close to subsistence. Bread made from rye or barley pottage, made from peas or beans, onions, and seasonal greens, formed the base of many diets, with cheese, eggs, fish, or small amounts of meat when available. Gardens mattered because a few vegetables and herbs could stretch a pot for days. Access to forests and game was often restricted, and even gathering firewood could require permission. In good years, households stored grain salted, what they could brewed small beer, and enjoyed the reassurance of full bins. In bad years, they stretched flour, relied on beans and thin soups, and watched prices rise in nearby markets. A failed harvest was not only an economic problem, it was a family emergency. Housing played a large role in comfort and health. Many peasant homes were built from wattle and daub walls with thatched roofs and packed earth floors. They were practical, repairable, and made from local materials, but they were not sealed against damp smoke or pests. A central hearth provided heat, and a place to cook yet smoke could linger indoors, especially in winter when doors stayed closed. Light came from the doorway, small openings, and the fire itself, so interiors could be dim even at midday. Space was limited, and a single room might hold sleeping areas, stored tools, and food supplies. In cold months, animals might be kept nearby for warmth, which helped survival, but also brought dirt and insects into the living space. Illness spread easily in such conditions, and medical options were limited. Clean water was not always reliable, and infections that we treat quickly today could become serious. Injury was another danger. A cut from a blade, a fall from a cart, a broken bone, or an infected tooth could mean weeks of weakness, and weakness could mean missed work and missed food. Villages relied on local knowledge, herbal remedies, and the support of neighbors.
Have mercy on us,
Midwives, wise women, and experienced elders played important roles in monasteries or church institutions, sometimes offered basic care. But when disease or injury removed someone's strength, there were few safety nets beyond family and community. The Black Death reached Europe in 1347 and reshaped medieval life in dramatic ways. Chroniclers describe villages left quiet and fields left untended, and historians estimate enormous losses across the continent. The plague affected all classes, but crowded living and poor nutrition could increase vulnerability. In the years afterward, labor shortages changed the balance between landowners and workers in some regions. Surviving peasants sometimes found new leverage to ask for better terms, while rulers and landlords tried to preserve older systems of obligation. Some governments tried to hold wages down and keep workers from moving, but enforcement was uneven. and people still sought opportunity where they could.
The scoundrel!
In the
Shame
long
on
run,
you!
the shock of the
You've got what
plague
you deserve,
encouraged
you
change
thief!
landowners, experimented
Throw
with
him
rent
another
villages,
turnip!
reorganized, and
They are
older
coming
obligations
tomorrow.
became harder to
We must
maintain
move
exactly
the
as
supplies
before.
dawn, or
Alongside
we will all
work and
starve
illness,
this winter.
local authority shaped
By the
daily
order of the
decisions.
magistrate, you are required
On
to
many
sign this
estates,
document and take
the Lord
your
and his
seats.
officials controlled the court, the fines, and the permissions that affected a household's options. The manorial court could settle disputes over land strips, fences, and debts, but it also enforced rules that favored the estate. A family might be fined for missing a Labor Day for using a private hand mill instead of the Lord's mill, for grazing animals in the wrong place, for brewing ale without approval, or for breaking a custom about wood gathering.
That will be sixpence, master.
These small rules
fine
mattered
price for
because
such
they
fresh
collected
eggs.
money and reinforced the idea that the Lord's rights reached into daily life.
That will be 3
Punishment
farthings for the
often
dozen.
aimed to enforce order through public
They
example.
look splendid.
Village stocks, fines paid in coin or goods, and extra labor duties were common tools. At the same time, medieval village life was not only the Lord's will and everyone else's obedience. Many communities had long-standing customs, shared expectations, and informal ways to negotiate. Villagers knew what the Lord needed: work, completed dues, paid peace, maintained, and that knowledge could create space for bargaining, especially when many households stood together. The village was also a social world. Neighbors shared tools, helped at harvest, watched each other's children, and supported families facing illness.
What if we choose
Even under
poorly?
pressure, community
We can't
could be a
go
real
back.
source of strength. Women faced additional pressures within this world. They worked in fields, managed household tasks, cared for children, and took part in local exchange when possible, such as selling eggs, cheese, thread, or cloth. Women also carried much of the burden of food preparation, fuel gathering, and nursing the sick, which meant their labor never truly ended. In a system with strong power imbalance, women could be vulnerable to coercion or harassment by those with authority. You may have heard the story often called droit du seigneur, sometimes described as a formal first night rite. Historians debate whether that existed as written law, but the broader point is clear: when power is unequal, abuse becomes easier, and poor women often had fewer protections and fewer ways to seek justice. Family life was shaped by economics as much as by affection. In many regions, serfs needed permission to marry, and a fee might be required in England. This is often discussed as merché. For a household, that fee was more than money. It reminded people that even personal milestones could be treated as part of estate management.
The baskets
Landowners
are heavy
cared about
tonight.
marriage
Yes,
because
it was a
marriage
good
produced
harvest.
children, and children
Are the
meant
children
future
still
labor.
playing?
They are, near the
If
old
a
oak.
woman married into another manor, the original lord might lose future workers, so cross-manor marriages could be discouraged or made expensive. Marriage, in short, was personal, but it was also political and economic inside the manor system. Religion added another layer. The church taught that marriage was a sacrament, and many peasants treated it as a serious commitment marked by community recognition and spiritual meaning. Baptisms, saints, days, and seasonal festivals offered structure and comfort, and they
raising the
gave
prices on
villages
the seed
moments to
again. I
gather
don't know
for
how we're
worship
supposed to
and
make it.
celebration.
We can't just accept
But
it,
the
man.
feudal
We
system
have to do something
often
different this
viewed
time.
family life through a practical lens. A stable household meant stable labor and stable rent. Children usually inherited their parents' status, which helped the system reproduce itself over generations. From a young age, children learned tasks suited to their strength: watching animals, gathering kindling, helping with planting or harvest, and their early work was part of the family's survival plan. Autonomy existed, but it was partial. A household might have a garden, a few animals, and strips of land to manage for its own food. Some families brewed ale, kept bees, spun wool, made simple pottery, or did small crafts to trade for salt iron or better cloth. Local markets and fairs offered chances to exchange goods, hear news, and meet people
Move these
beyond the
crates
village.
to the staging area.
Over
Watch the
time,
beam. Live
trade
together
and the
now.
growth of towns created new possibilities. Some peasants moved into wage work, some purchased freedom, and some gained freer status by living in a town long enough to claim a different legal standing under local law. Even so, leaving was never simple. Travel required money contacts and luck, and a poor harvest could pull a family back into dependence quickly.
In this sacred space,
For many, the
let
best
the
path
truth of his
was
word
not
penetrate
escape,
your very souls.
but steady
Hail
improvement,
Mary, full
a
of
better
grace, the
plowshare,
Lord is with thee.
a sturdier
Blessed
roof,
art thou amongst women,
few
and
more
blessed is
animals
the fruit
and
of
children
thy womb, Jesus.
who might one day find a different life. So what did a serf's world look like in practice? It was often small in geography, but large in responsibility. Many people lived and died within a few miles of their birthplace. They knew the fields, the river crossings, the woodland paths, and the neighbors who shared their work. They might never read a book, yet they carried practical knowledge that kept society fed: when to plant, how to rotate crops, how to care for animals, how to repair a roof after a storm, and how to preserve food for winter. Oral culture mattered: advice, prayers, stories, and local memory passed from one generation to the next. A village was not uninformed. It was informed in different ways, focused on survival and local relationships. The great monuments of the Middle Ages depended on rural work. Grain and livestock fed builders and soldiers. Timber, stone, and iron moved along roads and bridges that local labor helped maintain. Tithes and dues funded projects that peasants might admire from a distance, but rarely benefit from directly. Recognizing this does not erase the era's beauty or the achievements of medieval craft. It simply shifts the spotlight. Cathedrals were not only spiritual symbols, they were also economic engines that required food, materials, and workers year after year. Even castles, so often shown as isolated towers of power, were linked to villages through supplies, taxes, and labor. Feudalism also relied on beliefs and habits that made the system feel normal. Sermons and social custom often emphasized order, duty, and patience. Many peasants accepted these ideas even when they also felt frustration because resisting could be risky, and because community life was deeply rooted. When law, tradition, and religion all pointed in the same direction, change became slow. Yet serfs were not simply silent. They negotiated, resisted in small ways, delayed tasks, moved when they could appeal to custom, and sometimes joined larger uprisings when pressure became unbearable. The system looked stable, but it was always being tested by human needs and human choices. When we look
need
back
more
today, it
hands
helps to
stacking the
remember
wheat.
both difficulty and humanity. Rural life could be demanding, but it also included family bonds, shared work celebrations, music, and the comfort of familiar faces. People marked weddings and births, told stories by the fire, and found pride in craftsmanship and good husbandry. Most serfs will never appear by name in grand chronicles, yet their choices shaped local landscapes, built traditions, and carried communities through centuries of change. If we want a full picture of the medieval world, we cannot only follow crowns and armies. We have to follow the hands that planted the grain and built the roads. Serfdom did not end everywhere in the same way or at the same time. Over centuries, economies shifted, towns grew, and labor became harder to control. The Black Death reduced population and changed bargaining power in many regions, while rulers tried to slow change with laws that limited movement or controlled wages. In some places, paid labor and tenant farming expanded and obligations gradually softened as money replaced labor services. In other places, landowners tightened control and extended it for generations. In Western Europe, many forms of serfdom weakened over the late medieval and early modern periods, replaced by leaseholding and wage labor, though poverty remained real. In other regions, tighter control over peasants continued far longer. The main lesson is that systems of unfree labor can fade slowly through many small legal shifts, economic pressures, and local negotiations, rather than one dramatic moment.
Kind, my friend.
If you enjoyed this grounded look at medieval
My
daily
lord, I
life,
swear by the rood, I
please
meant
like,
no harm. It was an
subscribe,
accident.
and ring the notification bell
confirms
for
your
more
negligence.
episodes
You are
from
fined
medieval
3
spirits.
shillings.
That'll
The Middle
teach you
Ages
to
were
steal
not
our
only knights
grain,
and
you
castles.
scoundrel. Enjoy
They were
the
also
stocks.
families working through seasons, building communities inside limits they did not design. By learning about serfs, we see the period with clearer eyes and deeper respect Not because life was easy, but because so many people managed to endure, adapt, and quietly shape the world that came after them.